All right, Ecclesiastes 1. Let's read verses 1 and 2 here. 1 and 2. Who'll read Ecclesiastes 1, 1 and 2? Chris, go ahead.
The words of a preacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity.
Great way to open that letter there. And I asked you in question number 1, give a brief summary of what you know about the author of the book. So, says the preacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Who are we talking about? Yeah, Solomon. Pretty well points to the fact that it's, Solomon's the one who wrote this book. He had great wisdom. If you go over to 1 Kings, we want to explore a little bit here about Solomon and his background. What do you know about Solomon? What do you recall about him?
Wisest king ever set foot on earth.
Okay, wisest king to ever set foot on earth. Anything else? 1 Kings 4:29 to that point. 1 Kings chapter 4. And let's read verse 29. Who'll grab that for us? 1 Kings 4:29. Elijah.
1 Kings 4:29.
Yes, sir.
And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure and breadth of mind like the sand on the seashore.
Okay. Why did he have this wisdom, by the way?
He asked for wisdom from God.
Right. He asked for it from God. God said, I'm going to give it to you and a whole lot more. But God granted him this wisdom, and it's interesting how that's worded there. He had the understanding like the sand that is on the seashore. So he knew so much about so many different things. What else do we know about him?
Like a lot of kings, he starts off strong, and then towards the end of his life, all this wisdom that he had really accounted for nothing because he started acting foolish.
Okay, so where does that fit in with the book of Ecclesiastes?
Well, it's like a totality of his life, the book is, because, it tells you what to do, and it gives you his perspective, what he did, and not why he did it, but what happened when he did the things he shouldn't have done.
Okay, here's my understanding and perspective on this. Ecclesiastes is at the end of his life, and him saying, essentially, I totally messed up. Here's what you need to know. That if someone has a book in the Bible, which Solomon has, how many, essentially? I mean, not all of one of them is his, but the other two definitely are. How many's he got? Well, 3. 1 and 2. Okay. That he was right with the Lord when he left this world. He was right with him. And this is him dispensing wisdom to us, to that next generation and the ones to follow. 1 Kings 4:26. Who'll read that for us? 1 Kings 4:26. Go ahead, Paul.
Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen.
And the next one too, please.
And these governors, each man in his month, provided food for King Solomon and all who came to King Solomon's table. There was no lack in their supply.
Okay, so what's that telling us, those two verses? Now, some translations, instead of 40,000, it has 4,000 for stalls for his horses, but whichever way it is, what's it telling us?
It's talking about his great wealth that he had accumulated.
Okay, great wealth that he has. 1 Kings 7 Let's read verses 1 and 2. 1 Kings 7, 1 and 2. Who'll read that for us? Go ahead, Hank.
But Solomon took 13 years to build his own house, so he finished off his house. He also built the house of the forest of Lebanon. Its length was 100 cubits, its width was 50 cubits, and its height was 30 cubits, with 4 rows of cedar pillars and cedar beams on the pillars.
Okay, and you could go on and read more about that house, but thinking about his works here, we're going to get back to the wealth in just a second, but how long did it take him to build this house?
13 years.
That seems like an exceedingly long time, does it not? Okay, but there's a reason it took 13 years. It wasn't because Solomon had supply chain issues and worker shortage or anything like that. He didn't have those problems. He took 13 years because of the kind of house that it was. It's indicating to us he built a grand house, and it gives us the size there. So 100 cubits is how long in our terminology?
18 inches.
Yeah, 1 cubit is 18 inches, so 100 cubits is
150.
150 feet. Okay, it's 150 feet by what? It says 50 cubits, which would be 75 feet. So 150 feet long, 50 feet or 75 feet deep. So math whiz is 150 times 75 is what? 11,250 square feet. Who's ever lived in a house like that? I haven't. I haven't even been in a house like that. Been in some big homes, but not one that big. Okay, how tall is it?
45 feet.
45 feet. Now, I don't know if that's like, it's 45 feet throughout the house, or if it's 45 feet on the first level and then there's a second level. I don't know exactly, but if there is like a second level, then we're talking about 22,500 square feet minimum, right? Of how it's a humongous house. Took 13 years of all the stuff that he did in it. What does that tell you about Solomon and the way he does things? Anything? He does them over the top, right? He's building a grand work here, and this is just one of the homes that he built. Besides the idea of having his castle, if you will, in Jerusalem, other places that he would have around. Zach?
Just thinking about that project, he probably had the best people building it. He had the best materials. He pretty much owned the forest of Lebanon, the version Hank read, built in the forest of Lebanon. He let that wood age as long as he needed to, because he knows how nature works. He not only has the wisdom, but he has the knowledge of just how the cycle of the nature and the weather patterns work. We kind of pick up on that in the very first chapter in Ecclesiastes, which points back to Solomon as well. But he took those 13 years to plan, get the best people, and wait the proper time. Likely, this is speculative, of course, but what else would you do with 13 years of a building project except to make it absolutely perfect and ornate?
Yeah, and when you read about him building the temple in particular, it talks about the craftsmen, even men that he imported that other kings sent to him because they knew these things like they were the experts in it. And no doubt he's employing these kinds of men in all of his building projects, which, when we get into the book of Ecclesiastes proper, we're going to see him talking about all these things. And this is the kind of thing he's referencing here. He's not talking about he built him a shed in his backyard, or his kid's treehouse. That's not the kind of works Solomon was involved in. He was involved in large-scale, huge building projects, took lots of manpower, lots of material, lots of planning, a lot of skill, all of that. 1 Kings Chapter 10. 1 Kings Chapter 10. Let's read verses 14 to 18, and then we'll skip down and read a little bit more. But 1 Kings 10, 14 to 18, who will read that for us? Go ahead.
The weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents, not including the revenues from merchants and traders and from all the Arabian kings and the governors of the territories. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 shekels of gold went into each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold with 3 minas of gold in each shield. The king put them in the palace of the forest of Lebanon. Then the king made a great throne covered with ivory and overlaid with fine gold.
Okay. So 666 talents of gold is what he got every year, besides what he got from the traveling merchants. So in other words, duties and fees and stuff like that, from the traders, from the kings of Arabia, from the governors of the country. So this is talking about all that money that's coming in, 666 talents. Now, a talent, depending on what source you look at, is somewhere between 60 to 75 pounds. Or another source that I found said a talent was 1,099 troy ounces. Gold is normally measured these days in troy ounces, things like that. So gold, as of lately, is around $1,800 per troy ounce. Times 1,099. So, okay, math whiz, what do you got? All right. $1,318,145,400. That was his income just in gold. Okay. As far as I know, there is nobody on earth, even today, that has that kind of income. Do people like Bezos or Elon Musk, do they have wealth that's just beyond comprehension? Yes, but that's not their income. That's what he's getting per year, pouring in, besides all these other things that are coming in. And we read a while ago where that Solomon received like food, whether it's grains or meats or whatever it is, that people sent in to support his household to be fed. So he basically has zero living expenses and all this income coming in. So what do you do with that much gold coming in? What does it tell us?
You make stuff.
You just make shields to hang on the wall, make them out of gold. I mean, it's hard for us to comprehend how extremely wealthy he was. And it was put on display everywhere. Go ahead.
Well, I was looking it up. That 600 shekels is about 140 pounds. So each one of those 600 shields weighed about 140 pounds of gold.
Yeah, just, it's mind-boggling of all that was there. But that's what God did for Solomon and told him, look, I'm going to give you wisdom, but I'm going to give you wealth too. And this is wealth beyond compare here. So thinking about that, that's who's writing this book and telling us these things, these life principles and lessons that he learned in everything that he went through, experienced, and observed, and all of that. Now, the book itself is what I describe as conversational, right? It's sometimes we read a book and there's a logical progression, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Essentially, they're somewhat of a progression through the life of Christ, from the beginning, whether it was he was born, or beginning when he was preaching, and then following him through to the events of the resurrection, the ascension. The book of Acts is sort of like that. There are other books that are topical, and they go through and they kind of address things like our Galatians study. First 2 chapters dealing with the apostles, defending his apostleship, and then the last several chapters dealing with the issue at hand, the doctrinal issues at hand. So that's not what Ecclesiastes is. It's conversational. It meanders back and forth between different topics. The New American Commentary gives this. This is just very brief. So, introduction, chapter 1, 1 and 2. It speaks of time in the world in verses 3 through 11. Then he talks about wisdom in verses 12 to 18. Then chapter 2, verses 1 to 11, he talks about wealth. Then he switches to wisdom in 12 to 17, to wealth in 18 to 26. Then he goes back to time in the world in the first part of chapter 3. Then he talks about politics, then about death, then about politics. And it just keeps going like that. When you have conversations, maybe we just came through the holiday period being around family, isn't that the nature of our conversations? They sort of meander, they go back and forth, we touch a topic, then we move to another topic, then we circle back around to that topic we were on, 15 minutes ago. That's really the format, if you will, of this book here. Now, question number 2, I asked you to briefly explain the theme of Ecclesiastes. What do we have? What is that theme?
Solomon gives us his observations based on the life that he lived, the riches that he had, his knowledge of man and God and work and life under the sun, which is life in general. But he gives us his observations based on the life that he lived.
He gives those observations. And Zach, did you have something?
Life is full of meaningless and enigmatic things.
All right, chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. This is one of those books where we don't have to guess about what he's trying to drive home, because at the end of it, he just drives it right home. So 12, 13, and 14, who will read that for us? Ron?
Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil.
Here's the conclusion. You need to get the point. Listen to what I'm telling you. It's all about fearing God and keeping his commandments. That's what life is all about, because he is addressing the issue, the purpose, the point of life throughout the book. And he covers so much as he goes through that. Now, John mentioned a while ago about under the sun. In question number 3, I'd asked, what does the author mean by under the sun? John mentioned, life in general. Any other thoughts there? When he's talking about under the sun, and we go through the book, he's talking about, as I stand here on earth, and I look out and I observe. He's not necessarily talking about, well, let me explain to you from the spiritual realm all these things that are happening, right? Because when we get in later in the book, and we'll talk about this in some detail, it talks about man compared to animal, and when we die, we're like an animal. Well, Jehovah's Witness will take that and they'll twist it and say, well, we're just like animals, we die and we're nothing. That's not what he's meaning. He's saying, from me looking at it, okay, there's a dead man and there's a dead animal. What's the difference? Well, I can't observe really any difference. There's no life there. So under the sun is just a view of man's perspective in this world as he looks out and sees things. Now, he says, again, going back to chapter 1, Ecclesiastes 1, verse 2, and Zach mentioned this a while ago, what is life in this material universe?
It says vanity, vanity.
Vanity of vanities. And let's understand that Solomon is the definitive authority on this. Okay? We understand that God has inspired him to write this. When you read it, and we see that, vanity of vanities, sometimes people in this world have a fatalistic view. What is it to have a fatalistic view of life? Mike?
All is just sorrow and gloom and darkness, and there's really no happiness to be found anywhere.
No happiness, no meaning, no purpose, nothing good. That's not what Solomon's saying. Solomon is a realist. He's saying, here, because as we go through the book, we're going to see these little nuggets in there where he says, hey, this is good. Hey, this is good. But you need to be mindful. Here's a problem. Here's an issue. Here's a challenge, if you will. So we're not going to take our experiences and our wisdom and improve on or even come close to Solomon's survey and commentary on life. This is it. You want a handbook on life, if you want the short summary, this is it, this book right here. He tells us power and fame are empty. Knowledge, emotions even, pleasures, they're worthless. When it comes down to it, all that's no good. And that life itself and anything we do in life, when it's divorced from a higher purpose, it has no meaning to it, has no value to it. So, when we look in our society, present or past, and you think of people who were idolized as successful, who comes to mind? What about, okay, this is for those who are a little more seasoned, what about JFK? Was he successful? Oh, son of multimillionaire, had good looks, very charismatic. Everybody loved him. He rose to become president of the United States. And what happened?
Bang,
What's that?
bang, somebody took his life.
Yeah. Yeah, he was killed. He was assassinated. What kind of life did he really live?
Not a godly life.
Not godly at all. He's a famous womanizer, drinker, all those things. Why did he do that?
Well,
Power.
Do what?
Power.
Part of it's power. I mean, he sought the presidency. That's definitely, you have to want power.
He didn't have God in his life.
He was trying to satisfy his fleshly desire.
He was trying to find meaning in life, happiness, peace, contentment. More modern times, Bill Clinton. What kind of man is he? He's a very famous scoundrel. But a lot of people say, look at him, successful, so popular, wealthy, was the president, all those kinds of things. Meaningless, pointless. You think about people like Donald Trump even, Richard Nixon. Modern times, maybe somebody like a Taylor Swift, right? Our society puts those people up there as, look, that's what you want to aim for. That's what you want to shoot for. And Solomon, this book says, it's all a lie. That is not what you want. It's not going to bring you peace and contentment and happiness, fulfillment, meaning. It's not going to do it. No one, any of the people we've mentioned or anybody else you could ever think of is going to come and tell us something better or wiser than Solomon. They're not going to do it. So there's vanity, there's emptiness, there's absurdity to these things and what people pursue. They build their life on fiction and baseless things. Well, let's go to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew 6. I just want us to notice that the Lord echoes this exact same message in the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount essentially is the constitution of Christianity. Here's the foundational truth of what it is to be a Christian. So Matthew 6, let's read verses 25 to 34. A little bit longer, but let's read all of this. Matthew 6, 25 to 34. Who will read that for us? Mike?
For this reason I say to you, do not be worried about your life as to what you will eat or what you will drink, nor for your body as to what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow, nor do they gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they? And who of you, by being worried, can add a single hour to his life? And why are you worried about clothing? Observe how the lilies of the field grow. They do not toil nor spin. Yet I say to you, not even Solomon, in all of his glory, clothed himself like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? Do not worry then, saying, what will we eat? What will we drink? Or what we will wear for clothing? For the Gentiles eagerly seek after these things. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own.
Of course, that's following after he said, don't lay up treasures on earth, lay up treasures in heaven. But he goes down through here and the Lord saying, you can't look to these things, worry about these things, pursuit of these things is really empty and it's vain. You need to think about the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And it's interesting that he brings up Solomon in here. Look at Solomon. All his glory. The man who made house decorations out of gold because he had so much gold. He's not even as glorious as a lily in the field that's out there growing in the wild. So God will take care of you. Don't worry about those things. Don't focus on them. Focus on serving God. Exact same message really that Solomon is giving in Ecclesiastes. And let me ask you this. If material things, the things of this world, were inherently good, what would God do for his children relative to those things? If it was really, really good to have all kinds of wealth and money and power and fame, what would God do with his children?
We have shields of gold on the wall.
Yeah. He would pour it out on us if it was inherently good, because he wants good for us. So, we get this message from the world. Oh, money is good and power is good and being famous and getting all the likes and the hearts and all that stuff on social media. That's good. It makes you feel good. It's empty. After you get likes on one post, what do you need? For those of you who do this. Well, I need likes on another post. Oh, I need another one. I need another one. There's no end to it. Mike, you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, if all those things were good and the glory of all of that were what God wanted, where is God's temple? I mean, all the glorious things that went into something that was very sacred, and Solomon put all of this effort into that. There's nothing but a wall left, and it's about the third temple. That wall is about the third temple.
Yeah.
And so it's all been raised and it's gone, because God does not put his stamp of approval upon those things. That's not what we ought to be striving after.
Yeah, good point. The way we worship God now, as Jesus talked about, spirit and truth, there's not that physical location, but look at churches of men, and they put a lot into that physical building. Let's go back to Ecclesiastes 1 now, and let's please read verses 3 through 11. Let's go all the way down 3 through 11. Who will grab that for us? Elijah.
What profit has a man from all his labor which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes toward the south, and turns around to the north. The wind rolls about continually, and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. All things are full of labor. Men cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is what will be, That which is done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new? It has already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after.
Okay, so verse 3, what profit or what gain, what advantage has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? Pointing to that vanity, let's go to Philippians. Keep your place there, but let's go to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4. And he's really pointing to this idea that there's no satisfaction there. And Paul addresses this issue in Philippians 4. Let's read 10 to 12. And Philip, would you read that for us? Philippians 4, 10 to 12.
I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again. Though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to me, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned to both be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need.
Okay. He says, verse 11 particularly, I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. He learned it. He said, I was content when I had everything and more than I needed, and I learned contentment when I didn't have even what I needed. So I learned that contentment. So contentment is really not dependent on our circumstances. Contentment is us deciding to be content. And back in Ecclesiastes, that's really what he's pointing toward. What profit is there from your labor? What is there contentment? Is there true satisfaction in this? And the answer to that, of course, is no. He says, one generation passes away, another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. Men come and go. Generations come and go. What impact do we have on this world? Anybody?
Very little.
Almost zero. Pretty close to zero impact. We don't really change this earth, the world, the way things are. So getting into that, question number 4, I'd ask, what is the point of the description of the natural elements in verses 5 to 7, where he talks about the sun and the wind and the rivers? What's he getting at there?
All of these things have seen generations of men come and go. We are really nothing special to them. I mean, they're going to continue to do what they have been instructed to do throughout times.
Any other thoughts? What does Genesis chapter 1 tell us about the sun, the moon, the stars? Does anybody remember? Why are they there? I mean, Psalm 19 tells us another reason they're there, but Genesis 1 says they're there for
Time. Days.
yeah, days, seasons, years, right? They're there. Why are they there? What is time? What's the good thing about the stars, the sun and the moon? What do we know if the world stands? What do we know is going to happen in a little less than 12 hours, about 11 hours, give or take?
What they possess is constancy, predictability. Our whole means of life exists around the constant nature of God's universe. Time itself, as you mentioned, in the beginning. So God put these things in place that give us a standard measurement of time that regulates our lives. Where would we be without any of that?
Could not exist. Could not exist. We could not function without. There is a constancy in nature. In Genesis chapter 8:22, after Noah and his family came out of the ark, the Lord said, look, as long as earth stands, there's going to be summer, there's going to be winter. There's going to be harvest time. It's going to be those seasons, those changes, going to be those things going on. All right, so have you ever heard someone say, well, this is the hottest year there's ever been? This is the coldest year. I guarantee you look at the news headlines, you're going to see, oh, it's the hottest month on record. What about it? Hey, you ever go talk to an old-timer? Old-timer. Okay, Chris qualifies as an old-timer now, because earlier tonight, talking about the snow that may be coming in on this weekend, that he said, well, back in like 85 or 86, there was a snow and it was all piled. Okay, if we get 7 inches of snow, I guarantee you there's somebody who's going to say, I've never seen it snow so much. This is crazy. And Chris come along, old timer. Well, you know what? Back in 85, and you talk to somebody, well, back in 62, my dad used to talk about, he could remember as a boy in East Tennessee, 3 feet of snow on the ground. Well, what does that tell you? You go back in the record books, there's a pretty good chance you're going to find where it was hotter or colder or wetter or drier than it is now. But what if you could go back before the record books were kept? Now, scientists think they can. It's not reliable. But if you go back, look, it's just the way that it happens, right? There's the cycles, and it's a constant thing over and over and over again. And we live in this little bitty sliver of time, and we think this is all of the experience. It's not. We come and go. The earth is here, doing its thing, year in and year out. Where's the sun rise? How often?
Every day.
Always. Always. If this planet is here, I don't think it's going to be, but if it is here another billion years, the sun is always going to rise in the east. That's never going to change. It's just not going to happen. It gives light, it drives weather over and over again. The wind travels south and north, it whirls around continually. Do you know if we built a 5,000-foot wall, we would not keep the wind out or stop the wind? Has anyone ever stopped a hurricane? Tornado? They never will. It's not ever going to happen. What about rivers running into the sea? Where do they go? What happens then? What does he say here? Okay. I don't know about some of you, but growing up, I distinctly remember, I think it was the 8th grade, I had a science teacher, and he was one of the hippies, right? He said, one, he and his wife decided not to have children because the world was so overpopulated, and I have no idea what it is, but I'm sure we have 1 billion or 2 more than then. But then also, he talked about all the water rationing they did in their life, because we're going to run out of water. Are we going to run out of water? It's not going to happen. It is just not going to happen. Same amount of water has been here for thousands of years, and it's going to continue to be here. Okay? Now, whether that's in clouds or in rain or in snow or in ice, or it's in the ground, or it's in the oceans or lakes or what, it's the same amount of water. Did God know that there would be 7 billion people on the planet and they would need water?
Amen.
It's all there. It's all the same. It keeps going and going and going, and we are not going to change it. But what does he say in verse 8? Ecclesiastes 1 verse 8.
All things
Okay, all things are full of labor, laborious, wearisome. Do you guys ever get tired of doing things? What are some of the things around the house you get tired of doing? Y'all get tired of something. Laundry. What else? Dishes.
There's a lot of things you get tired of doing, but the laundry always gets me.
Okay. Okay. There's these things we do over and over and over and over again. It's just wearisome. I mean, there are a lot of people in these past 2 years, there's been a whole societal phenomena of people quitting their jobs and going and finding something new, because a lot of people, they're just tired. They're just worn out. They're like, I need something new, something different here. So there's all that labor, and it says man cannot express it. Man is often confounded by life and things in life. It's hard to absorb some things. It's hard to explain with reason. We struggle to adequately explain life and experiences and our hopes and fears and emotions that we feel. It's difficult to do that. Man cannot express those things, and the eye's not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What's that referring to? Mike, do you think you're ever going to get to the point, I've seen all the natural beauty, I've seen all the national parks, and I'm good? Right? There's nothing else to see out there. Right? I mean, even some of us, multiple sunsets or multiple sunrises in a month, we're like, wow, that is so great. But then that experience, that feeling fades, and what do we want? We want to see another. We want to see more mountains, more oceans. See, the eye's not satisfied with the seeing, nor the ear with hearing new things, learning, understanding, great stories, if you will. So this really is representative of all of our desires and all of our actions, that we are just not going to be satisfied with these things, with this life under the sun, so to speak. So he says in verses 9 and following, in question number 5, how is it that there is nothing new under the sun? Right? Because doesn't Apple come out with a new iPhone seems like every 6 months? What about it? How is there nothing new under the sun?
People's behavior, people's problems, people's temptations, people's desires, people's solutions, all those, it's the same cyclical nature that he just used. And just starting with nature, people's lives and issues are the same way.
Well,
using your example of Apple and various devices, they still encompass the basic things that already exist. So you can read your email, so you can listen to voice, so you can see an image, so you can send a message. Those things have all previously exist, but we have altered the form of which it's being done.
Okay, think about this. I don't know, I can't remember if we've ever discussed this before, but the material universe, at the end of day 6 of creation, everything we have ever had was there. Uranium, plutonium, oil, gas, every single thing was there. So technically, there literally is absolutely nothing new under the sun from that standpoint. Ron?
In addition to that, Stephen, anything that we could imagine to create, that we need a resource to create, if God permits us to, it is made available to us.
Yes.
Because
And
God knows.
we have to manipulate what's already here to get something, right? Okay, so to what Ron was talking about before, internet and cell phones. Oh, that's all new. It's communication. Communication's been here from day 6, right? There's 2 people on earth. They're communicating. It's been here. It's nothing new. Cars, airplanes, spaceships. What are those? It's transportation. It's always been transportation from your feet to a donkey to whatever. It's always been here. Heating and cooling. Computers. What are computers? Information storage and retrieval manipulation. That's been here. Yeah, brain. Brain is the ultimate computer, right? So yeah, that's all it is. You know, forms of government, x-rays, things like that. There's x-rays, as I understand it, naturally in the world. I mean, that type of thing exists. That's how we figured out it was there and could then manipulate it, control it, use it to do things. Mankind has forgotten much and is rediscovering it. Has anybody ever heard of the Baghdad battery? Anybody?
What?
Baghdad battery?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what it is, what it was?
It's like two, kind of like, looks like flower pots with coils going inside of it with water and.
Okay. 3rd BC is what this is dated to. And it's a clay jar. It has an asphalt stopper. And in that asphalt stopper going down into the jar is a copper cylinder with an iron rod that goes into the middle of it. They would fill it up with vinegar and it produced 1.1 volts. And they used it for electroplating is what they believe. So we think, oh, look, we've discovered this electroplating in relatively modern times. No, they had it like 2,300 years ago. Yeah. There's pretty good evidence that the ancient Egyptians understood flight. They found a bird that was a model bird, a small model bird, that is exactly to the dimensions and the specifications. I don't know all of it, but like an airfoil, like on an airplane wing, that they recreated it and they flew it. And they think it was based off of a man-sized thing, whatever, glider type thing. Sling and the stone. Does anybody know about like the sling and stone that David used? How he took down Goliath? Does anybody know about ballistics and things like that? Okay, they've tested those things. That what David did is like a .45 caliber. That if you took a .45 caliber and you shot someone, that's the force of impact that his sling and stone had is equivalent to that. And they are extremely accurate in using those things. So all those types of things. Oh, and there's another one. It's kind of neat. Has anybody heard of Archimedes Death Ray?
Yes.
Okay.
You would sink the ships in the bay by using the sun, and I think it was glass, some type of big glass.
Yeah, essentially big mirrors.
Mirrors.
Yeah. Okay. So there were records of that in ancient times, and over the, let's say, past 300 to 500 years, they thought it was a myth. Right? They thought, oh, there's no way there's this death ray, because that sounds really bad. All it was focused sunlight on Roman ships that they focused that sunlight there, they caught them on fire, they burned them in the bay. And that's how, as I understand it, Greeks defeated the Romans in their invasion fleet, things like that. But be that as it may, there's nothing new under the sun. You know, it's just different ways of us doing these things. And so when we read about this, and we read about Solomon's observations, it's not like, yes, but now. No, there's no yes, but now. It's nothing new. What you're talking about there is the same thing that applies today. It's eternal wisdom.
If you try to come up with something that hasn't happened, a disease or invention, you're missing the point. He's trying to make his life's experience of being born, of laboring and toiling and dying, has been that from the beginning, and chasing new things and trying to come up with new things. This is new. Well, you're missing the point if that's because he's talking about the experience of life is the same as it's always been as it applies to man. He's trying to get folks to think eternally instead of
focused on this world, right? We get distracted with things in this life, and we're not to be distracted with those things. Very good.